People in the private sector are paid only when they can sell their products and services to people who want to buy them voluntarily. A person in business cannot force anybody to buy their product or service by pointing a gun at them. People have to volunteer to part with their money. They have to volunteer to take their money out of their wallet and pay for the product or the service. It's voluntary. But the only way that government gets money is essentially with a barrel of a gun. If you don't pay your money to the government, you go to jail. So the government doesn't have to produce anything that you want. The government doesn't have to create or produce anything of value. The government can just, by pointing a gun at you in effect, take your money from you. That's how the government makes money. If you're a government worker, it doesn't matter if what you do is needed or wanted. You get paid no matter what, just for showing up to work. Sometimes you don't even have to do that and you still get paid. And now I'm not saying we don't need government. We certainly need laws and we need regulations to make the system work. You can't play a football game without referees. But we have gone way beyond the pale in terms of tipping the rules of the game in favor of government work over private sector work. It's the private sector that creates the products and services and the jobs and the wealth. Government could not exist without the private sector, which pays for the entire government. It's just unsustainable that the average federal worker now makes double the average worker in the private sector. Now think of the perverse incentives that are now in place with government workers now making more than the private sector workers, actually making double what the private sector workers make. It means that the best and brightest people will go into government work because that's where the money is, and that's where the security is. Not only do you make double the money if you're working for the government, but it's almost impossible to lose your job. You have a job for life once you're in the government. Once you're in the government, you are a member of a government labor union, and you become virtually unfireable. That's why you get such great service when you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles. That's why the people at the IRS are so friendly and helpful. That government union worker that's sitting behind the desk at the DMV or the Social Security Administration office, well, they don't have to give a crap about you. They don't have to care one whit about what you think. That government worker, that unionized government worker, doesn't make 1 penny more by making you a satisfied customer, by making sure that you are happy, and she doesn't make 1 penny less by treating you like dog poop. So that's why you usually get treated like dog poop by the government worker. And that, by the way, is how you're going to be treated under Obamacare when that fully kicks in. When Obamacare kicks in, when you go to the hospital or your doctor's office, it's going to be a lot like going to the Department of Motor Vehicles. You're going to get treated like crap. So what we really have now in America is a form of serfdom, where the ruling class lives off the production of the workers in the vineyard. That is, the workers in the private sector. In this plantation, the ruling class, the people in government, and the government class, they're the slave owners, and we're the slaves working in the vineyard for the benefit of the government. Now here's another chart that should scare the bejesus out of you. What this chart shows is how during the recession, the government hasn't lost any workers. Government employment has remained steady since the start of the recession. But employment in the private sector, that has fallen through the floor. And I link to this chart below for your further study. The point is that this is obviously unsustainable. The private sector just can't keep paying for this growing public sector when the private sector is shrinking. When you add the fact that the private sector is shrinking while the government workforce is holding steady in terms of the number of workers in the government, plus the fact that federal workers now earn double what the private sector workers earn, you can see why we are headed fast toward economic collapse, as confirmed by both the IMF and Congressional Budget Office studies that I referred to earlier. Actually, we're already bankrupt. We're just not acting like we're bankrupt. It's like the person who's living off their credit cards and they're living like a king. Eventually, though, the credit runs out. And then the piper must be paid. You can only print money for so long, even if you're the federal government. Even if you have the power to print money, you can only do that for so long before people start treating your money like it's confetti, as happened back in Germany in the early 1930s, which paved the way for Adolf Hitler. Now, America's already become the laughing stock of the world because of Obama's wild spending frenzy. Even the communist Chinese are lecturing Obama about fiscal restraint. Even the communist Chinese are worried about the collapse of the United States of America because the Chinese are holding so much of our debt. They don't want the dollar to become worthless either. So yes, the world is laughing at us, but they're also very worried because they're concerned that we might take the entire world economy down with us, like the Titanic. Our national debt now stands at $14 trillion. Now that's the size of our total economy, our total gross domestic product, our total GDP. Economists say that once a nation's total debt reaches 90% of total GDP, that is 90% of the size of its economy, that is pretty much the point of no return. That's the point when you really can't hope ever to pay it off. So that means soon that you're going to have to start defaulting on loans and financial commitments that you've made. Then what happens is the interest rates on your debt increases. Your interest rates go up. So the cost of financing your debt increases dramatically. And that's when the financial collapse begins to happen, like a house of cards. And then you basically have a road warrior situation on your hands. Panic on the streets, just like in Germany before the rise of Adolf Hitler. That's quite likely the future that we're looking at unless we take immediate corrective action. We have to cut taxes and regulations on business. We need to stop strangling business. We need to make it easier for businesses to produce and create things, easier for businesses to create new products and services, easier for businesses to do business. Because that's where all the money comes from. All money in society comes from business. But we have in the White House the first anti-business president in American history in Barack Obama. Government has grown a staggering 25% under Obama in just 19 months. 25%. There's no reason we can't immediately undo that 25%. We're not going to miss that 25% of extra government that was just dumped on our backs in the last 18 or 20 months. Let's undo all that. And while we're at it, why not cut federal salaries in half to bring them in line with what the private sector is making? Why should government workers be making more than those who are paying their salaries? It's just an outrage. Better yet, how about we start following the Constitution? If the federal government actually followed just the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, our federal government would be about 20% the size it is now. So how about we do that? How about we start following the Constitution again? How about we cut our federal government back down to constitutional size? Well, that's it for tonight. Be sure to vote and bring at least 5 like-minded friends with you, because we can't make any of these changes if we keep electing the wrong people to public office.